Monday, everyone. John Lorden here with a brand new episode of Brain Scratch Case Cracked. It's nice to be back, spending some time with all of you. Hope you're having a great day. So today's case, I want to give a very big thank you to Christy Arnhart for researching and writing this one up. It is called A Cold Justice Mistrial. And if you guys are wondering, is he talking about the show Cold Justice? Stay tuned. We've got some really interesting twists in this case. Cuero is a small town in DeWitt County, Texas, with a population of almost 7,000 people. It was to this small town that Pamela Shelley would be moving with her children from Arkansas. Pamela had only recently come out of an abusive marriage. She took her kids, 12-year-old daughter Kayla, and 9-year-old son Dustin, and headed off looking for a new start for all of them. They would find it in lifelong friend Ronnie Hendrick. In August of 2000, he moved her and her children 800 miles from their home to his house just outside of Cuero. Unfortunately, the family's new start would not turn out to be what any of them had expected, as Pamela would once again find herself in yet another troubled relationship. At 5:15 p.m. on January 6, 2001, the DeWitt County Police Department received a disturbing call. Ronnie's stepfather, Cecil Kegley, reported that a distraught Pamela had shot herself. As police officers arrived at the couple's home, emergency medical services were driving away, with Pamela barely clinging to life in the ambulance. Ronnie had offered to give the driver directions using the shortest route to Cuero, which was about 20 minutes away. Because the area is so remote, small towns work at the county level for all emergency services instead of having them based in every town. From Cuero, she would be airlifted to San Antonio. While paramedics fought to save Pamela's life, investigators took photos of the house, in particular the bathroom, where they found a .32 caliber revolver and holster on the bathroom counter. A slug and Pamela's blood were found on the floor. During questioning, the family stated that Pamela actually wanted to leave Ronnie. Earlier that afternoon, she asked Ronnie's stepfather, Cecil Kegley, if he would take her, the kids, and their possessions back to Arkansas. He agreed and drove his trailer next door to their home to be loaded. Ronnie was outside on the front porch with the children when, after loading the trailer, Pamela had walked back into the house. Soon after, he heard a gunshot and ran in to find her on the floor of the bathroom. When his family heard the disturbance next door, they quickly ran over where everyone was present, then attempted CPR until paramedics arrived and took Pamela away. Debbie, Ronnie's mother, claimed that Pamela had spoken often of harming herself in the weeks before the shooting. She said that Kayla was a difficult child and had caused a lot of problems. Mikkel and Shannon, Ronnie's brothers, said that this type of mental illness ran in her family and that she had made similar attempts before leaving Arkansas. Unfortunately, later that night, Pamela died in San Antonio. At her autopsy, the medical examiner observed that the gunshot was a contact wound to the right temple, traveling front to back, down to up, and right to left, a classic self-inflicted wound. With this information and her troubled past, investigators ruled that Pamela had indeed shot herself. Even with this ruling, officers were not through with Ronnie Hendrick and asked that he take a polygraph test, to which he agreed. The test was set up on at least 2 separate occasions, but both times Ronnie failed to show. Soon, within weeks of Pamela's death, he would disappear completely. In 2008, 7 years after the shooting, Officer Carl Bowen was a newly minted investigator for DeWitt County Sheriff's Office. Officer Bowen wasn't on duty the night of the shooting, but had responded to the call nevertheless. When he arrived, Pamela had already been removed from the scene and was receiving medical aid. But what he would always remember were her children. Both were about the same age as his son and sadly had been shoved to the side in the excitement of the moment. They knew that their mother was hurt, but nothing else. It was as if they had been forgotten. The fact that Ronnie had never taken a polygraph test and then disappeared after Pamela's shooting had also bothered Detective Bowen. He had always harbored doubts about Ronnie Hendrick's version of events, and he would finally have the opportunity to question Hendrick when Ronnie arrived unexpectedly in DeWitt County Jail. Ronnie had been charged with domestic abuse after he had beat up a woman he was living with. Officer Bowen also soon discovered where his suspect had been during the years since Pamela's death. Ronnie had gone to South Dakota, where he was charged and jailed on felony DWI charges. After approaching Ronnie in his cell, Officer Bowen was able to get him to agree to that long-awaited polygraph test. As he had suspected, the test showed that Hendrick was being deceptive, and when confronted with the results, quickly asserted his right to counsel. Soon after taking the polygraph test, the penitentiary recorded Hendrick admitting to family members that he had lied to officers originally. He still denied killing Pamela, but now claimed that he was in the room with her when she died, a significant change from his earlier story. Unfortunately, after prosecutors reviewed the case, as it stood, they did not believe that it was prosecutable, especially in view of the medical examiner's long-standing report of the wound being self-inflicted. Pamela's case would be left open, but would still remain cold for quite some time. 4 years later, in 2012, investigators were offered a different way to approach the case. TNT had a new television show called Cold Justice, and they were looking for cold cases that needed help. And DeWitt County had such a case in Pamela's death. With the help of the show, investigators started retracing their steps by questioning the Hendrick family and Ronnie's brother Shannon in particular, and that would offer some interesting facts. When Shannon ran to Ronnie's house, he asked Kayla what had happened. She said the two had started fighting outside, during which Pamela walked up to her children, said goodbye, I love you, and then walked into the house where she shot herself. As paramedics and investigators arrived, a game warden questioned the family and tested Ronnie for gunshot residue. Shannon says the game warden told them that Ronnie had a small amount of residue on his hands that he had acquired by attempting CPR on Pamela. But investigators would learn that Shannon might be lying. After speaking with the game warden who responded that night, they quickly learned that no GSR test was ever performed on Ronnie. Shannon then decided to end the conversation by telling investigators that the gun that Pamela used was a family heirloom, and the family would really like to have it back. Next, investigators did something no one in 2001 had bothered to do. They called and talked to Pamela's friends and family in Arkansas. Debbie Gibson, a lifelong friend of Pamela's, swears that she would not only never harm herself, but had stated several times that she would never do something like that to her children. Pamela always spoke to her brother Donald Curley once a week by telephone. Before leaving Arkansas, he stated she was very upbeat and happy. But after the move, when she spoke to her brother, she said that things had gone wrong between her and Ronnie. Ronnie, Debbie, and Mickle all claimed to have attempted CPR on Pamela. When EMTs were questioned, they stated that when they arrived on the scene, all three were just standing around Pamela's body. In a room covered in her blood, not one of them had a drop on them, and no one was attempting CPR. Prosecutors had also established a timeline that showed a delay of over an hour from the time Pamela was shot until EMS were called. With another 20 minutes drive time to the next town added, this would have given the Hendrick family ample time to get their stories straight and possibly arrange a crime scene. The experts on Cold Justice were also able to assert that Pamela had been standing in front of the mirror in the bathroom when Hendrick entered with a gun and pointed it at her. She instinctively turned and ducked, but he was too close, and he was still able to put the muzzle of the revolver to her temple and fire. What finally convinced prosecutors to file charges was a little extra investigating by Officer Bowen. Weeks after filming Cold Justice, Officer Bowen found Pamela's ex-husband, Jesse, who was incarcerated in a Texas prison. Jesse told him that he had spoken with Pamela and Ronnie by telephone the day that she was shot. Jesse told Hendrick that he and Pamela were going to get back together. Jesse was the children's father, and the family was finally going to be reunited. According to Jesse, Hendrick grabbed the phone from Pamela and told him that the only way she was coming back to Arkansas was in a pine box. In light of this new information, Jesse was asked to take a polygraph test, which he easily passed. Investigators felt that Jesse had kept this information to himself because his earlier experiences with the law had institutionalized him to a point that he just didn't trust police anymore. Lastly, they decided to talk to Pamela's children, something no one had ever done. Although Pamela's son Dustin was still so shocked he refused to speak about that day, her daughter had a lot to say. Kayla states that the day started with her mother cooking the family a large dinner of fried chicken, homemade bread, mac and cheese, mashed potatoes, and gravy. Hendrik came home drunk and would constantly pick at everything Pamela did, which soon started a fight. He yelled that he wanted her and her kids out. She then told her children to go put their shoes on, that they were leaving. As Kayla walked past Ronnie, she whispered, "You've messed up now." Without a word, Ronnie hit her in the head, causing her to fall against the bar. Her mother immediately walked into the room wanting to know what had happened. Dustin stated that Ronnie hit Kayla, which started yet another fight. Without another word, Ronnie began beating Pamela. Ronnie had never hit the children before, and soon after, Pamela asked Ronnie's stepfather for a ride home. A few minutes after loading the trailer, Pamela walked inside the house, followed by the horrific scream and the gunshot. When the children ran inside, they could see their mother from the waist down, lying on the bathroom floor, with Hendrik standing in the doorway. With this evidence in hand, prosecutors were finally able to indict Ronnie Hendrik in November of 2012. His trial date was set for early September 2013. Unfortunately, as jury selection was taking place, prosecutors would learn that TNT had decided to run Pamela's episode. Would their potential jurors have watched the show? On the day of the trial, the judge asked the jury to hold up their hands if they had. 1/3 of the panel raised their hands. A mistrial was declared, and the judge reset the case to June 2014 to be tried again in Cuero, with the vague understanding that venue might be changed in the meantime. The hope was that by June, the shock value of the show would have worn off and a new jury could be picked. Prosecutors spoke with Hendricks' attorney, where they were extremely direct, saying, "Okay, we can't get a jury today, but we will get one someday, and that jury is going to hear everything that was on Cold Justice, plus about 50% more. Every person who saw Cold Justice thinks Ronnie did it. A jury is going to think the same thing." Only one day after the mistrial was declared, Ronnie Hendrik pled guilty to murder in exchange for 22 years in prison. That day that Hendrik pled guilty, Officer Bowen was driving Kayla along with her family and friends back to their home in Ashdown, Arkansas. All had been present the day Hendrik made his plea of not guilty. Although they were all disappointed, they knew that the road to finding justice for Pamela had been a long one, and none of them were ready to give up. When the sheriff's office called Officer Bowen and gave him the news, everyone in the car was elated. "They all let out a yell in the van when I called and told Carl," DeWitt County Sheriff Jode Zaveski said. "We're very happy. Carl was right. He knew from the get-go that something wasn't quite right and stayed with it and took care of it. There was never a doubt in my mind that she didn't do it," said Donald Curley, brother of Pamela Shelley. "We wanted a guilty plea out of it. We wish it was longer, but we're willing to take it." Investigators were also grateful for the assistance Cold Justice was able to provide in the case. What they really brought was a different set of eyes. Bringing those views in to look at the case with a completely different point of view and come to the same conclusion just reinforced what Carl knew all along. Case cracked. So I really wish that we saw this type of conclusion in many more cases like this. You guys that watch the channel know that we've covered several cases where there's this assumption that the person actually ended their own life. Jonathan Cruz case, the Christian Andriacchio case. And it's nice to see one actually get turned around. And I just wish that kind of how they explained here that Carl Bowen had a funny feeling about this. Like it just didn't fit right and it didn't feel right. I really wish that investigators would hold on to that and process those feelings out, because sometimes you might actually make a discovery like we made here in this case. So another win for Cold Justice, another win for justice in general, and I'm really happy that we were able to share that story with you here today. I also think it was pretty cool that essentially the confession was kind of squeezed out by the prosecuting attorney, by him making that very direct statement. I don't want to call it a threat, but it was a very direct statement about what they're going to do. They're going to present the same information that was in the episode plus some, and they're going to get the guilty. They're going to get the conviction. So I thought that was a really interesting twist in this. And just on a little side note, I did get to meet Kelly Siegler at CrimeCon. I actually got to hand her a Searchlight pen, which I was very happy to do. I really just appreciate the work that Cold Justice has done on so many different cases. Before I end today's video, very big thank you to several people that made donations through PayPal. Thank you so much, Jennifer Dixon, Penny Manzaratos, Sherry Brand, and Amanda Beard. I really appreciate the support, especially Case Cracked for some reason. YouTube is demonetizing like crazy. So if you guys saw an ad on this one, awesome. If you didn't, that's probably what happened. But thank you guys so much for donating through PayPal and Patreon to help keep me here doing what I love doing. You can do all that over at www.lordenarts.com. There's also merch. Anything you do over there basically supports the channel, helps keep me here. So I really appreciate that. Take care, everyone. Have a great Monday. Have a great week. I'll see you back here on Wednesday with a brand new episode of Searchlight on the Lord and Arts channel.